Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, or HaKodash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone for teaching this truth, and peace and salutations to all the Yakim out there kicking this word in truth and sincerity, risking their lives and their freedom to do so. Now, this video I'm going to title, this lesson I'm going to title, Sugar, is it keeping you from being on fire? In Esau's society, in this kingdom here, we consume a lot more sugar than we did in the olden days. As a matter of fact, we didn't even consume sugar. Sugar was a rarity, something that, at least in Europe, only the wealthy consumed because it was extremely expensive and difficult to process. But I'll get into that. So in this kingdom, sugar and our mass consumption of it has kind of been normalized. For instance, you got your breakfast. As a kid, we're fed all these cereals. Now, if you have kids now and you feeding them this breakfast cereal, I recommend you go look at the ingredients list. What you're going to find is that it's going to say either wheat or corn first, and then the second or third ingredient in all these cereals, guaranteed second or third ingredient, is going to be sugar. And the way the ingredients list work is what the food contains the most of comes first. So if you have your cereal and it's wheat, that's, as far as the weight of that product goes, that's the most that's in that product. The next thing, which is typically sugar, is the second most per weight in that product, which means you're mostly consuming sugar and just wheat, and a lot of this wheat, of course, is stripped of a lot of its nutrients because it's sometimes it's bleached, sometimes you get that whole wheat, but it almost doesn't matter if you're consuming that much sugar. We consume way too much sugar in society. So yeah, as a kid, you got your breakfast cereal, but now we're all grown up. So for breakfast, in this kingdom, because we're all so busy working, a lot of us will just skip breakfast. You know what we'll do? We'll go get that coffee from Starbucks, and if you're like me, you like it black. I don't put any sugar in my coffee, but a lot of people, they go for that Starbucks coffee. They want that caramel frappuccino with the whipped cream on top, and then sometimes it's not even sweet enough, so they'll add more sugar. And then while they're in Starbucks, they see that muffin, right, or that granola bar, which the granola sounds a little healthy, but it's still full of sugar. You just look at that ingredients list, and I'm going to show you a list of sneaky names for sugar, because it's not just going to say sugar. It might say something else just to trick you. Or maybe you really like them donuts for breakfast, and I don't know who still eats donuts for breakfast besides cops, but damn, if you eat donuts for breakfast, man, oh my gosh. Anyhow, so lunch comes around, and okay, you're not going to eat all that sugar for lunch. Maybe you're going to get a sandwich or something like that, but you want to wash it down with some soda or some sweet tea, or maybe some Gatorade, and then after that, you get that sweet tooth again. Maybe you get that cookie or you get that Snickers bar a little later after lunch. And then dinner comes around, and you got to wash dinner down with soda or your sweet tea. And after dinner, some of us like that dessert. So it's like, some ice cream or maybe another cookie or something like that. And as far as Jake goes, Jake is just, they're a target for this kind of diet, for all these sugars and sweets. And it's not just Jake, but they really do try to target us with a lot of this junk. And there's a reason for that. Sugar is really detrimental to the body in large quantities. So I'm going to go a little history here on sugar. I'm going to jump to a Wikipedia page. I'll pause that. All right. And the history of sugar is traced back to Asia. It says sugar has been produced in the Indian subcontinent since ancient times, and its cultivation spread from there into modern-day Afghanistan, through the Khyber Pass. It was not plentiful or cheap in early times. And see, like I said earlier, it wasn't plentiful. It just was really hard to get. It wasn't cheap, so we didn't consume nowhere near as much sugar. Uh, and in most parts of the world, honey was more often used for sweetening. And we see in the scriptures, honey is mentioned several times. It doesn't say anything about sugar. I think there's one mention of sweet cane, or maybe it's sugar cane, or just cane, but it's referring to um, sugar cane. And honey is actually a lot better for you, especially in its raw form. If you're eating it processed or heated, and it's pretty much just like sugar. But you know what? Most of what we encounter in our diet is cane sugar. Originally, people chewed raw sugarcane to extract its sweetness. Sugarcane was a native of subtropical India subcontinent and Southeast Asia. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here. So, sugar was a luxury in Europe until the 18th century, when it became more widely available. It became highly popular, and by the 19th century, sugar came to be considered a necessity. This evolution of taste and demand for sugar as an essential food ingredient resulted in major economic and social changes. Demand drove, in part, the colonization of tropical islands and areas where labor-intensive sugarcane plantations and sugar manufacturing could be successful. The demand for cheap labor to perform the labor-intensive cultivation and processing increased the demand for slave trade from Africa, in particular West Africa. So it was that sweet tooth of the Europeans, the Spaniards, that actually was a big factor in driving the slave trade from Africa. You know how we got over here. After slavery was abolished, the demand for workers in the British Caribbean colonies was filled by indentured laborers from India subcontinent, in particular India. Millions of slaves and indentured laborers were brought into the Caribbean and the Americas, Indian Ocean colonies, Southeast Asia, Pacific Islands, and East Africa and Natal. Thus, the modern ethnic mix of many nations that have been settled in the last 2 centuries has been influenced by the demand for sugar. And again, this is the sweet tooth of Esau in Europe. Like it said, we weren't really the ancient peoples. We sought after honey. It was plentiful. It was sweet enough. There's just something about the sugar that Esau and these other nations, these heathen nations, that loved it. And invested a lot of energy into making sure they could cultivate it and process it, and even brought us slaves into the processing of it. And this is something that, being in this kingdom, we almost couldn't avoid following in their way as far as consuming sugar. And the scriptures warns against us following the ways of the heathen. And this seems like something insignificant. Of course, it's talking about following after their idols and all that, but I mean following after the many different ways of the heathen. There's so many things that the heathens do that are not good for us. I'll jump into some scripture here. Jeremiah 10:2, we'll go to that first. And it says, Thus saith the Lord, learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them. And this is one of the things that we just kind of followed along with it. They like to eat sugar. We in the beginning, of course, we didn't really have any choice, but once we got a little bit more freedom in this country, we were already falling after just consuming sugar, just like Esau, just like the other nations. Romans 12:2, and be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. that ye may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of Yahweh. It is not really, it hasn't been a good thing for us to conform to this in this kingdom, to just uh, eat all the sugary drinks, all the desserts, eat ice cream at night, and your sweetened cereal in the day, and just, I mean, man, let me pull up this picture here, because this is an idea of how much sugar we consume just in our drinks. I mean, even orange juice down there has a ton of sugar, and the reason why orange juice and these fruit juices aren't really good is because they don't come along with the fiber necessary. The fiber in fruit that you get kind of balances out the sugar. Now, you can eat too much fruit as well. You're just eating fruit all the time isn't a good thing. I eat a lot of fruit myself, but I try to balance it out. But the fruit juices, they're processed, they're pasteurized, and it kind of isolates that sugar to where drinking these fruit juices aren't good for you. And look at the soda. You drink a double gulp, or what's that, extreme gulp down there. I don't even know how many grams of sugar that is, but that's a lot of sugar. And we have a problem with obesity in our people. And not only that, gout is also another problem that it's more prevalent in the Negroes. And gout is basically something that happens when you have too much sugar in your diet. You can get it from drinking too much too. And basically, what happens in gout is uric acid builds up in the body, and it's not excreted as it should be, because something about the sugar sets it off balance, so that uric acid builds up in the joints and crystallizes, and that causes a lot of pain. So here's a list of sugar, the things that names that sugar falls under, that hides in a lot of our processed foods. And just to give you an idea of where we have sugar in our diet, how it hides. High fructose corn syrup's on that list. That's a highly processed sweetener. I know for me, some of these sugars don't mess me up as bad as others. When I'm reading the ingredients list, like I always read, if I'm consuming something processed, I always read that ingredient list just to make sure I'm not putting poison in my body, because Esau, they with the food processing, they're really all about money. They don't really care how bad these processed foods affects us. So they're putting artificial colors in, too much sugar, artificial this, artificial that. I always read that ingredients list because I don't want to put poison in the body and defile this temple. But high fructose corn syrup really messes me up. Sugar, cane sugar. If I have too much of any of these sugars, really, a date sugar I do all right with, but rice syrup I do okay with, maple syrup I do okay with, but in larger quantities, all these sugars, they jack me up. They really they mess my body up. They I don't even know how to explain it. It's just, it does something but basically what it does, it extinguishes my fire. I can't think as clear. My energy's reduced. Here I have a list here. So the sugar increases inflammation in the body, increases depression. So if you're trying to stay on fire in this truth, and you're eating a lot of sugar in your diet, the sugar is going to counteract that. It can cause depression, lower your energy. It causes cognitive decline. For me, in the past, and luckily I've done a lot of cleansing to get this out, but I had a really bad candida, and sugar in the body, and sugar in my body would just give me the horrible brain fog. I couldn't think clear. My memory was really messed up. It jacked me up, and there was no way back in the day, there's no way I could have been fire in this truth. while having that much sugar in my diet. It was not a good thing for me. Um, I got pull up a web page here. This is truth about sugar addiction. Sugar is actually more addictive than cocaine. But I think there's a couple of points in here I wanted to bring up. Uh, this is how sugar affects the health. It upsets the mineral relationships in your body, causes chromium deficiency. I don't know what that is, but I'm sure it don't sound good. Interferes with the absorption of calcium and magnesium, increases total cholesterol, triglycerides, and bad cholesterol levels. And you know, us, a lot of us Negroes, we have a problem with cholesterol and heart disease. Lowers vitamin E levels. Behavioral changes, leads to addiction and intoxication, similar to alcohol. Increases hyperactivity and depressive symptoms. Causes difficulty in concentrating and drowsiness. That's going to keep you from being on fire in this truth. Reduces learning capacity and can cause learning disorders. You're trying to get these scriptures in, you're trying to read and learn, and you're consuming a lot of sugar. It's going to interfere with that. Increases the risk for antisocial behavior, decreases emotional stability, increases the risk for alcoholism, increased risk of diseases, promotes cancer cell growth, increases fasting levels of glucose, increases blood pressure levels, and you know we got a problem with that, increases platelet adhesion, which can put you at risk for arterial thrombotic conditions, leads to formation of kidney stones and gallstones, promotes excessive food intake through rapid sugar absorption, increases the risk for obesity, decreases insulin sensitivity, leading to high insulin levels, eventually diabetes. I don't even want to go through this whole list, but there's so much. Alzheimer's disease, gout, and I have Alzheimer's. That my grandfather had that. It was horrible watching him suffer with that. Man, I don't wish that on anybody, but so much that sugar does to the body, and we're consuming this stuff like it's a vitamin. People consume sugar oh, they need it, like they have to have sugar in every meal, and like it's some necessity. It's not. If we do need sugar in our diet, but we can get that from fruit, and that's where we should be getting it from because it's nice and balanced. So I'm gonna go to a couple of scriptures here, and then I'm going to close out on this one. Going to Romans 14 and 21, and it says, it is good neither to eat flesh, nor drink wine, nor anything whereby thy brother stumbleth, or is offended, or is made weak. And this can apply to, we're trying to be on fire in this truth, and we're trying not to stumble, but you're eating a lot of sugar, and you're feeling depressed, you don't know why, or you're feeling tired after work, and like, oh man, I don't want to do a video, I don't want to do a lesson, I don't want to sit here and read, I just kind of want to veg out in front of the television. Sugar could be your problem, and it'll make you stumble. So, if you're consuming a lot of sugar, I recommend you cut back, do your best. Switch to eating fruit. If you get that sugar craving, this is what I do for that sugar craving, because the cookies and all that stuff's tempting. So what I'll do is I'll get some dates, some dried dates. They got a lot of sugar in them, but they also have a lot of fiber in them too. The dates are kind of like a dessert in and of themselves. You don't really need anything else when you're eating dates because they're so sweet, or just some good fruit and not too much of it. But that processed sugar, that refined stuff, that stuff's poison. Actually, I think I have before I get into this last scripture, I got this is a page out of a book that I have. Let me find this here. Bear with me a moment. All right. So this is out of the book called Alkalize or Die, and the book is basically talks about, or it teaches you how to balance the body out to be more alkaline based rather than acidic. And the acidic body is very prone to disease and illness. And there's a lot of things that we consume, animal products, alcohol, and then sugar. This is my whole point, is that it throws the balance off more towards the acid forming side. And you can see here we got a list of sweeteners, common sweeteners. We got honey on top there, and this is not the exact alkaline scale. You can say this is divided in half, because the alkaline scale actually goes from 1 to 14, but this is from 1 to 7. So that 5.0 is above the neutral. So honey is actually above the neutral. While you look down here, cane, oh, Slovakia. Let me get out of here. Good, okay. Cane, white processed, it says a poison if taken in any quantity, avoid it. So even here, it's saying that the cane sugar is not just, not only not good for you, it's a poison to the body and should be avoided, period. And you can look at it, it says the acid forming level is 1. This is the lowest level you can get. So it's highly acidic to the body, not good for the body at all. So let me get to this final scripture and we'll close it out here. So then because thou art lukewarm, neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth. And a lot of y'all are familiar with this scripture, but I bring it out because this lesson is about eating that sugar and how it could slow you down, how it could keep you from being on fire. And if this is your stumbling block, sugar, I mean, it's difficult because it's so addicting, but it's a really easy one to kick if you're trying to be on fire in this truth, and you don't want to be ejected from the body. Just work on getting that sugar down in your diet, and Lord willing, you can get fired up and be strong in this truth. So I'm going to leave it at that. I pray that this has been edifying. Shalom.